Hello, everybody. Welcome to our talk. Thank you very much for joining us on this lovely evening. My name is Ben Hart. I'm a coordinator at Extinction Rebellion Southwark, and I am hosting our talk this evening. We're very lucky to have a talk from Anouchka Grose in conversation with our very own Conor McMeel. So just to let you know, you're all on mute to start off with, and we won't be able to post in the chat at the moment. However, we're going to go through the talk, and once that's finished, I can open up the chat so people can join in and answer questions. So just as a quick agenda, we're going to have a quick 5-minute introduction to Extinction Rebellion. We do like to do a breakout and check-in. So Extinction Rebellion style, I'm going to put everyone into just groups of 3 or 4 people, and everyone can sort of check in and say hi and say how your day is going. Then I'll hand over to Anouchka and Conor for the talk, at which point I'll open up the chat for questions so we can sort of talk through those. It is worth saying this session is being recorded, so we can actually put it up on our YouTube channel after the talk. So, Extinction Rebellion, for those of you who don't know, we are a non-violent direct action civil protest organisation. The aim is to elicit governmental action on the climate and ecological crisis. If you haven't been aware of Extinction Rebellion, you might have been aware of some of the greatest hits. So the April 2019 rebellion had over 1,300 arrests, and that shut down 5 key areas around London, including Oxford Circus, which is here. The October 2019 uprising had about 1,700 arrests, and that was much bigger, it was much wetter and colder as well. But you can see there's some key, obviously, key faces there getting arrested. And the other news, the 3 demands. So Extinction Rebellion has 3 demands that we're trying to aim for. And in 2018, when these were created, they were quite ambitious and quite, they were definitely pushing the boundaries. And to a certain extent, all 3 demands have been met in some sort of way, some sort of shape or form. So the 3 demands: 1 is tell the truth about the ecological crisis and declare a climate emergency. And very quickly after the first April rebellion, the UK government did declare a climate emergency. And then the second demand was actually the greenhouse gas net zero and halting of biodiversity loss by 2025. Now, obviously, that is very ambitious. The UK government did announce a net zero target. It was 2050, which is about 25 years too late. But a lot of local authorities across the country, and in fact across the world, have started declaring climate and ecological emergencies. And a lot of the dates are much closer to 2025. So Southwark, for example, that we're a part of, has a net zero target of 2030. The final demand is the Citizens' Assembly on Climate and Ecological Justice. This is because Extinction Rebellion doesn't believe it has the answers, but it does believe there are enough smart people out there that do. And actually having a Citizens' Assembly is a appropriate way of getting decisions made when politicians aren't able or capable to do so, because it's just too politicized. So those are the 3 demands that we focus on. The next rebellion is happening on the 1st of September. So we're actually 3 weeks away from the next one. This is obviously going to be a socially distanced rebellion. And Extinction Rebellion are taking the demand to Parliament. As Parliament starts again after all the drama that's happened this year, there's going to be a focus on making sure that they're aware of the importance of the climate change emergency. And we're very keen that this is a key focus in the recovery that comes after COVID, hopefully. If you're interested in finding out more, there is an online form. You can go to rebellion.earth. And you can sign up to that. That will sign you up to the Extinction Rebellion UK newsletter. And then you can go to find your local group. If you're in Southwark, we have our own website, which is xrsouthwark.earth. And if anyone fancies donating, we always appreciate donations. The whole of XR is run on a shoestring, and any donations are gratefully received. So through the website, you can find a link to our Chuffed, which is our kind of Southwark fundraiser. We also have various different working groups, and with each of these talks, we are trying to highlight one of the working groups that we have with us, so within our group. So Extinction Rebellion Southwark has a selection of different working groups, from gardeners to lobbyists to finance and fundraising. And actually we have a regenerative culture working group. And the aim of the group is to actually support the people in Extinction Rebellion Southwark to ensure that activism is sustainable and that we can all keep going. This is something that can be done before, during, or after actions. And as with many of the groups in Extinction Rebellion Southwark, they're relatively new and small and always looking for new members. Some of the activities, actually, Tamsin, who runs the group, is currently the coordinator, has been undertaking listening circles and providing a space for people to share their hopes and fears. And actually, throughout the pandemic, we've been hosting online kind of listening circles on Zoom for people to connect. And the next one is on Tuesday, the 18th at 6 p.m. And there'll be information that comes out on our Facebook and communication channels. There's also group activities, so organise, park runs, for example. And as always, there is an email address there, which is XR Southwark Region at protonmail.com. So if anyone has any ideas, would like to get involved, do drop an email to the group. So what I'm going to do now is just quickly break out people into rooms. Just quick 5 minutes. Let's see if this works. You will all get you'll get an invite into a room. You don't have to join, but if you do, you can introduce yourselves, say how your day is going. So I'm just going to create the rooms now, and everyone should get an invite. So welcome back, everyone. Hopefully that gave you enough time to just meet and greet and say hi to yourselves. As I mentioned before, you're all on mute for now. I'll hand over to Conor and Anouchka, and then in about 20 minutes or so, we will open up so you can unmute yourselves and ask questions and put stuff in the chat. So Conor, Anouchka, over to you.
Thanks, Ben. So I'm with the lovely Anouchka Grose. Anouchka is an author and a psychoanalyst with the Freudian Center for Analysis and Research. She has written many books, some fiction, some non-fiction. I became familiar with Anouchka's work when I attended a perspective on the climate emergency, and Anouchka was presenting some talk on birth. Should women have children in a climate crisis? Thanks for coming, Anouchka. Eco-anxiety, your book, Eco-anxiety, How to Protect the Planet and Your Mental Health. So eco-anxiety is a very common used word these days. So what is it? And what sort of kind of anxiety or your patients or your clients bring into you?
So it's all sorts of different things. I think the thing that's sort of funny about it is that it manifests in different ways in different people. So there are the sort of classic symptoms that you hear about a lot, like just not being able to sleep. Insomnia seems to be really, really common. People say they just lie in their bed at night, just thinking about the oceans, thinking about the ice caps, just angry and upset. And so there's that, I'd say that was the kind of core symptom. But there are all sorts of other things too. So exactly, people thinking that they shouldn't have children, that, it's kind of unacceptable to have children, all that sort of stuff. I see lots of people who come and want to talk about that. But I guess you could say that it manifests in really weird ways that people don't necessarily know about. That there's the climate anxiety you do know about, and the climate anxiety that you don't know about, just because the fact that this thing is happening very manifestly all around us, and it's seeping through the news and conversations and all over the place, means that you might be registering anxiety without really, really knowing. So that there are the kind of big symptoms, and then there's the low level stuff, like this sort of constant guilt, the idea that you're not doing enough, the idea that just you're a bad entity doing damage to the world.
So have you seen an increase in people coming to you with such a thing? Yeah,
I mean, I don't think I've ever had somebody turn up and say, like, I've got this, and that's their one thing that they come about. It's always a collection of stuff. But especially maybe with people in their 20s and 30s, it's just almost always threaded through the things people talk about.
Right.
It's almost rarer for people not to mention that as part of the general map of their life.
And I noticed that if I'm reading information about the climate crisis, it tends to, infect me in ways that I don't realize. There's a very gloom element to the climate perspective. So I was just wondering, how would I know that I'm suffering from climate anxiety, or what sort of things will be happening to me? Is it like, some people, it would be an unconscious thing that's in a lot of people?
Yeah, that's such a good question. That's exactly it. Because, the people who come who know that they suffer it are one lot. But you could say, well, there's another lot of people who might have all sorts of manic defenses against suffering it. And those people might be politicians and they might be world leaders. And you could say the more sort of blind and blustering they are, maybe they're suffering from eco-anxiety. Maybe the fact that they're so invested in kind of, pumping up the economic system and flooding itself manifesting it in a really problematic way.
So denial?
Yeah, so denial could be a form of eco-anxiety, but that's not the one that somebody would come to analysis for. That's what somebody would probably act out in their life.
So if someone is coming and is very anxious about it, it's something that is happening. You can't really say like, no, everything will be all right, because it probably won't be all right.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, how do you kind of handle the fact that you don't want to freak somebody out, but you have to contain them and help them when there is a reality, though?
Yeah, exactly. But I think in a way that's the sort of, I don't know, I know that you're a therapist, so you know this, but there is a sort of myth about therapy that people turn up with worry and you say, don't worry, your worry is not real, so calm down. Because, people do worry about illness, death, separation, all sorts of real things that really do happen. So the climate crisis is sort of one more real thing that really does happen. So you're definitely not trying to edge people away from it. But I suppose it's that people suffer in really particular ways. So someone, whatever it is, like they have a bad relationship with their dad, maybe, and the way they'll suffer the climate crisis is to do with having, I don't know, really sort of hateful fantasies about politicians, like real rage that they can't get over, obsession with the news, watching these guys make bad decisions, or so if you separate the dad stuff out from the politics stuff, maybe they can suffer slightly less, or maybe they can become activists in a slightly more kind of, I don't know, productive way, or just untangle the suffering a bit for themselves so they can function slightly better. You sort of know what's what a bit more in it. So it's not that it's fake, or it's not that, oh, don't worry, it's just about your dad. But you kind of, I don't know, get a clearer picture of how it's working in.
And your book, would you say that was a response to the stories you hear of people coming to you in your consulting room?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it was a mixture of stuff, because it came out of an article about the Greenland Perspective Survey, which was about Greenlanders and how the very real effects on their surroundings. So, I don't know, having all sorts of, bringing about all sorts of mental anguish. So there's alcoholism, suicide, depression, all sorts of things, really rising levels in Greenland because of melting ice, changing travel, changing relationships, changing how people live. And so it was, that I was reading about that at the same time as seeing all the stuff in my practice and thinking, no, it's, it's already a kind of pandemic of its own. And I think that came out this time last year, the Greenland survey. And people kind of saying, oh, this is a looming crisis. But if you work as a therapist, it's kind of already a crisis that's already kicking in, that's happening.
And there's one thing I noticed about your book. Many of the books that I read tend to be, as I say, anxiety-provoking in themselves, like The Uninhabitable Earth, for one. But your book, it's a very kind of hopeful book. There's a lot of climate activism doesn't have to be sacrificed. You don't have to, give up everything. It's almost as if you're saying it's a marathon, not a sprint. In terms of how we deal with this. And Extinction Rebellion has a regenerative cultural group, as you probably know, and that kind of feeds into that, where it's if you're really into fashion, it doesn't mean you have to stop buying clothes completely. You can stop buying stuff ethically. And I thought there was a really interesting chapter in it about, it was more like, you know, a lot of people think that, especially people on the right, that it's giving up their values and giving up the things they like, and they have to stop driving cars. And your angle is kind of, you don't really have to be completely, you don't have to sacrifice everything that you love just because we're in an emergency. It's a balance.
Yeah, exactly. That if everybody gave up everything in the same way at the same time, then that would cause huge kind of systemic problems. And so it's better that people respond differently and have different solutions or whatever. I mean, I think there are big political solutions, and I don't agree with sort of green capitalism and just, well, maybe Bill Gates is going to solve it, or maybe the left are going to solve it, because I think that capitalism is a core part of the problem. So it's not to say, not to play that down at all, but just to say that if you're put off by the idea that if you're not perfect, then you're therefore acting in bad faith. That I think that's terrible. Like, people think they have to give up everything, otherwise it's not worth it, otherwise they're not for real, otherwise it's not proper, kind of thing. And if you hold that over people, I think probably the right do hold that over people, like point out people's minor hypocrisies or whatever in order to put them off. And I think it's like everybody stuffs it up here and there. But and if you're kind of thrown off course by the idea that if you're not kind of Greta Thunberg, just why bother? then that's a really terrible obstacle to throw in people's.
And there's a lot of flight shaming, for example, and I can imagine, like, some people have a lot of guilt in owning a car or taking a flight to see a family member, and I would just wonder if that's has a detrimental effect on the movement, that people might be afraid to join something like Extinction Rebellion because they're afraid that
they'll never see their family again.
Like, what do I have to do here? So it sounds like it's not a healthy way to look at activism.
Yeah, the all or nothing. Yeah, exactly. No, it's really, really destructive to the movement, I would say, as well as to individual people. Yeah, very, very unhelpful. And I don't really think that comes from inside the movement particularly. I think it comes more from outside, from people who are made uncomfortable by it, saying, oh, but you wear plastic shoes, or whatever it is, but picking on the details to try and undermine the project. And I think that causes a lot of suffering for individuals who come for therapy, feel that they're ashamed of themselves because there's going to be a giveaway, and they're trying, but why should they try? Everybody knows it's useless, etc. But and also, I suppose the thing with the flight shaming and stuff, I do understand it, and maybe it works to a certain extent, but there are always economic factors and class factors. Like, I watched this thing, The Milk System, last night. It's a brilliant Netflix documentary. But and after watching it, you can kind of think, well, as long as I buy really expensively produced humane milk and cheese, and I don't need to be vegan because, which is fine. That's, ecologically that works and makes sense. But then, you set up a system where it's so the rich people can eat a bit of cheese, but poor people better not, have to be absolutely pure vegan. Or, what are you saying if you start saying that? You can't. So you can't sort of set the same standards for everyone. Everybody has kind of weird ways of doing things. You have to make some sacrifices, but you don't have to sacrifice everything. Everybody's going to have to do it differently, according to them.
There's this movement that said, I just alluded to it in the conference that we went to, about the biggest thing that humanity can do with in the climate crisis is not to have a child, have one less child. And you have a very interesting argument that it's kind of like the affluent people having one less child is much more kind of beneficial than someone in the developing nations. It's wrong to blame, people in Africa or wherever. Why are they having so many children? That would solve the problem. But that's not the case. It's not as simple as that. Yeah, and it's also isn't the thing. It's also not as simple as that or something.
projects so people in rich countries could donate to people in developing countries to, I don't know, give them contraceptives and discourage them from having children, whereas, you know, their children are not going to cause us, you know, not going to have a bigger carbon footprint. But also, if you make people in wealthy countries have less children, you don't then get a simple mathematical reduction in carbon. So if people have less children, it doesn't mean they consume less stuff. Like, so some countries with low birth rates consume way more per capita than countries with higher birth rates. So even telling rich people to have less children doesn't work, because you just change the shape of society. You have aging populations, which force migrations, which can bring about racism. And so sort of it's not just as simple as one less child, which you see over and over again as you on websites, or when people say, what can I do, what's the best thing I can do, and over and over again you read, have one less child, which, and it turns out that's it's not true in developing countries, but it's also not true in any countries. It just doesn't work as a solution, and it's incredibly cruel to young people.
It's almost as if it's putting, you know, the onus on women to solve the problem for us. I mean, you have a right to have any as much as you want to.
Yeah, exactly, and you can do it responsibly. Or, it's like if you think having a child means having a Range Rover or a massive wardrobe from Gap or something, that is a problem. But if you don't think that, then maybe it's okay.
So David Attenborough, I think in your book you've mentioned that he was kind of on the brigade of if we have less people, we'll solve the problem together. So that's not something that you agree with at all?
No, not even slightly. And I don't think even he sort of agreed with it in the end. I think he just got kind of roped into a charity that looked on the surface like it was trying to be helpful. Yeah. But when you started to look at it, there were all these other policies to do with migration and stuff. They're sort of into zero migration and that kind of thing. It was horrific. So it was a thing that didn't work. And he definitely stepped back from it.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything from him since.
No.
So I was just thinking, we have a rebellion coming up in September, and a lot of the time, I find that a rebellion can be quite taxing, because you never know if you're going to be arrested, kicked off the road, etc. And I just wonder, I know a lot of people at the end of the last rebellion felt quite sick after it, and I was just wondering, is there anything that you've learned that can kind of give some wisdom on how to survive such a thing? I think mentally mostly, or physically.
Yeah, I don't know, but that's exactly what I would see over and over again, people coming, who were literally coming out of the rebellion to come for their therapy session and then go back in. And really, it's sort of the terrible disappointment, like in the October one, when it kind of went a bit awry and stuff. It's just so upsetting for people who really want to make a difference. And all the stuff about sort of BME representation in XR and all that stuff is so unsettling for people on all sides. It's really a problem. And it's just how to, I don't know, redress that, how to address it, how to solve it, how to think about it and do things properly. It upsets everyone. Understandably, it's good. I mean, it upsets them in a way that makes them think.
I think after a while, you with activism, I find that you're almost nearly always on the losing side. I mean, there's very few victories in it. It can be a quite deflating thing, I would say. So I was just wondering, how does one keep going in this? Because after a while you're going to be thinking, I just can't continue with this anymore. You're born out. Is there any way that you can prevent that from happening? Is it like turn off your television, don't buy a newspaper for a year and then come back into it?
So I've heard that lots of people do that, don't you? Sort of, I don't know, marine biologists and people who are really immersed in the stuff have to do that from time to time, have to switch off. And that giving yourself a break and not feeling guilty about the break is really, really necessary. And I really like the thing that an Australian GP said about functional denial, that lots of people have to use functional denial, that, denial is something, it's horrific, and it's what enables all the kind of the bad things to happen. But at the same time, if you feel it, you're porous to it all the time. You can't get by, you can't survive, and so there have to be moments where you rest, or moments where you switch off, or distract yourself, or do whatever it takes to get through it. And you can come in and out, can't you? It's not that once you're out, you're out. Yeah.
That's interesting, because I find that in my journey, at the start, I was very anxious about this stuff, and then at night time I would be like, wake up and be quite anxious. But then after a while, I would almost go into denial and not care, and I'd probably even start thinking, yeah, maybe it's not true. But I know I would be doing that just to not let it overwhelm me. It's just a very difficult, long battle we have, even though we don't have much time. It's a battle.
Yeah, and the time pressure is something horrifying, I guess, for everyone involved in it. That makes it very difficult to take a break. But you sort of know that, everyone has to take a break. That's so essential to the work.
Yeah. I was just thinking that, so I've got a niece and nephew, and if I go visit them, if they're in the house crying, I bring them outside, they look up at the sky, the trees, and I just immediately stops them. Really love the outdoors. And I was just thinking, they're not aware of anything to do with the climate crisis right now, but eventually they will. Some people would say, like, why would you tell a child something so dramatic coming in the future, and, keep it from them? And, Richard Dawkins, for example, would say, like, don't call the children. You can cover that. You think you should let children know about the realities of the world in kind of slowly give it to them, but don't hide anything from children, because they'll eventually find out.
Yeah, I think it's not to have a program of hiding it from them, but definitely not imposing knowledge on them either. And they are going to find stuff out, because it filters through in all sorts of ways, like, why do you have a recycling bin in your classroom? Or that children ask a lot of questions, and so they're going to find out, and they're going to find out from each other. They look online, there are going to be ways, so it's basically not to bullshit them when they come at you with questions, rather than sit them down and say, right, we're having a chat now because I've decided you need to know that you wouldn't do that, I don't think. But being truthful is really important.
And so what about schools? Do you think that, from the get-go, there should be some sort of awareness of, what's happening? Because there's not, probably, I would suggest there isn't that much right now. In the curriculum.
Yeah, exactly. I suppose children difficult things is not a new problem. So educating children about sex is problematic, and schools still seem to struggle with that. And I don't know, don't do it well enough, or do it well for some people but other people object, or you can't kind of get it right for everyone. And I guess the climate thing is similar to that in a way, but there have to be ways of talking about it, because it's just impacting everyone. And so I think it's that concealment is a huge problem. But there are lots of very sort of intelligent ways, like, I don't know, when they take children to an aquarium or something, the people in the aquarium might be trained to talk about how, I don't know, changing chemical balance of the sea or whatever is going to affect the fish, and how that happens in relation to, I don't know, transport on land, or, that they've just got good ways of explaining how things link up. Although even that can make children incredibly terrified. Like, if you think, I don't know, taking the bus to school is going to harm a polar bear or whatever, that's very distressing knowledge. And so, how to know upsetting things and function is a problem for children and for adults. And so when children first hear about death, that their grandparents are going to die or whatever, it's big news and it's hardcore. And I guess this is something like that. So it's not kind of special pleading. We can tell them about the other things, but we shouldn't tell them about this. It's part of the whole distress of being, of sex and death and finitude, and it's just got to be in there.
So do you think that, we're clearly going to be impacted by the crisis, but children are going to get it a lot more than we are. Do you think there's therefore going to be not only a climate crisis, but a mental health crisis?
Yeah, I think that's happening already. I mean, I just think on. Yeah, and I mean, I've got a teenage daughter, and the way they speak about it can seem very matter of fact, but then I don't think it's as matter of fact as it seems. Like the agreement among teenagers that having kids is a crap idea, because like, why would you bring them into this world? But yeah, there's a sort of, because it's so in the discourse, they can talk about it quite bluntly, but you think, well, hang on a minute, how's that really acting on you, or how does that make you feel about what kind of future you can have, or what kind of hopes you can have? So I think already for young people, all people, it's already a sort of really widespread mental health issue.
It's quite sad.
It's terrible. And there's also the stuff about diagnosed and undiagnosed. Like, I can't remember, I think it's in the book and now I've completely forgotten the actual numbers, but there's a huge percentage of people in the UK and in America with a diagnosed anxiety disorder. But, the undiagnosed people are probably far more numerous than people who can't sleep but never go to the doctor, or, who knows about those people.
And as you alluded in your book, anxiety isn't necessarily a bad thing, because to not be anxious when you know so much about the crisis we're in would be probably a bit deluded. So in a way, it kind of gets you going and makes you join Extinction Rebellion or recycle more or whatever. So it's not all bad.
No, exactly. No, I liked it when I looked up the word anxiety just to see, because it's such a common word. Like, why would you look it up? But it does have these two meanings. And this, the first one is a fear about something that might not happen. But the second one is to do with a willingness to act, like to be anxious to do something or anxious for something to happen. And so it does, that's sort of built into the word. So if you can tip it more towards that and make it a kind of active, functional anxiety, then you've got something that you can do something with. Yeah, it will stop you being complacent.
Yeah, it's more life-giving. It's hope. There's a hope to anxiety, really, isn't there? As long as it doesn't overwhelm you. As you say, functional denial. It's just enough to keep you going, but not keeping you awake at night.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking that you probably see a lot of people on the couch here, and you probably know humans more intimately than many other people, possibly. What gives you hope in terms of, do humans have it in them to turn this around? You must know a little bit about us.
I don't know whether, I wouldn't place bets, but I do think that, at the same time as you can say, well, human beings are very destructive, are very careless, are very aggressive, have all this sort of trouble in us, but there's this sort of massive capacity to love, to cooperate, to do stuff together, to respond to things kindly. So human beings are really amazing, and so I think it's a kind of, I don't know, you could bet either way, but I think there are reasons to hope that it could, things could go quite well. But I think the culture militates against it. Capitalism militates against it. It just sets people against each other. It's horrible. And sort of, competition, rivalry, greed, avariciousness, all that stuff, it's like biblical stuff. But it doesn't help people. And so undoing some of that stuff would seem much better, to stop people feeling that they have to sort of amass a load of things in order to be all right, in order to have status, in order to be respected. All that's the sort of corrosive thing, I think.
Yeah. There's a really nice quote at the end of your book. You said, and I think this kind of ties into the regenerative culture we have in XR, look after yourself, others and the planet, all three equally. You won't be able to do the last two if you don't do the first one. It's not selfish, it's kind. That kind of sums up the kind of spirit of your book, that yes, we're trying to fight a battle here, but we're still human beings and you still need to enjoy life. So I just wondered, is that something that we should all take away from this talk, that it's not just the planet, it's ourselves, that we need to be nicer to, because we've seen with the coronavirus, the response to in communities, we didn't turn against each other. There's a nice sweet humanity about it. So, all these stories of when societal breakdown will all start affecting each other. It doesn't really seem like that's
so far so good. Yes. Yeah, exactly. And I suppose the thing, of looking after yourself, being included in all the things that need looking after is really important. Sort of why look after everything and not yourself? It doesn't make sense. And that if you can function, you'll be much more helpful to other people. So so it's a kind of knitting it all together. And also the idea, that therapy or looking after yourself or having these, discussion groups or whatever, it isn't a kind of self-absorbed pastime for snowflakes or, that horrible way of characterizing it. It is actually a really good way of keeping yourself going. And
I think that's all I have.
Good.
It's been very nice. Nice really appreciate you coming. So Ben, we will hand back to you. I think we're doing some questions.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you both. First of all, that was absolutely fantastic. Really, really lovely to hear from you. And Conor, I think you've missed your profession, mate. That's wonderful presenting there. So everyone who's still here, thank you very much for joining. You're able to unmute yourself now and add questions into the chat. There's a chat button on the bottom. So if anyone wants to add in some questions or do a shout out, please do, and we'll go from there. Okay. That's it. No one's jumping, so I'm going to ask one. So I think there's some really interesting points there that hit a lot. I think I haven't actually read the book, but I'm very much looking forward to. If you've got any key recommendations for people who are, what are the key recommendations? Obviously, kind of look after yourself, but if you are struggling about this, what can people do to help with the anxiety, I suppose?
I think sharing it somehow seems to be really, really important, like not feeling completely alone with it. And it's funny, people often, when they talk about it, people who know that they're suffering from it, it's often moments when they're alone. Like, I think that's why insomnia is often such a big one. It's sort of when everyone else is asleep and the world's switched off, suddenly you're on your own with it and you just don't know what to do. So I think talking is really brilliant. So all the climate cafes and all the chat, the thing that you were talking about at the beginning, all that stuff is just super helpful to people. Or being part of, I don't know, organizations like XR or whichever, all that stuff helps a lot, I think, with anxiety.
Question.
Yes, certainly. Josh, jump in.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. No, I was maybe in a slightly more general, slightly less practical way, but just sort of to get into the depth of it. I guess we were talking about hope and children, and then could have children. Hasn't had children, slightly incrementally less selfish every year, since their survival is sort of clearly, I can't get away from it, like they're dependent on me. And so that got me in. But then, could you say more? Because one says, oh, I'm doing it for the children, but
Yeah, definitely. No, I hope I'm not going to say the wrong thing, because it's Charles' essay, which lots of climate psychology people read. But because this thing of doing it for the children, it's absolute common sense. It's like, well, we have to protect, they're small and they depend on us, so we have to sort this thing out. But then you see people just not sorting it out, and why would they not sort it out? And that's why I think, the ways psychoanalysis is kind of counterintuitive or often inverts the most sensible idea, and you get these sort of, I don't know, odder ideas that resonate as different kind of truths. And so it does seem that there's a theory that people are actually really jealous of their children, because their children are going to supersede them, their children are going to take over, their children are going to, I don't know, be stronger and cooler and have more exciting times than them. And so one punishment is to sort of ruin things for children. Sorry, mate. And it seems that like, how else do you explain how people treat the world if, a lot of the time there's a sort of, I don't know, a tricky kind of malice in it or something that a lot of people who, not you, a lot of other people. A lot of people, I think, who have children can be quite careless with the planet, and so there are sort of really weird dynamics going on, I'm sure. But yeah, the sort of the urge to protect, but also the urge to destroy, and all these things come up against each other in human beings.
So you're saying we sort of all both have a mixture of think we're protecting, but actually not, or how would you?
I mean, it would be terrible that everybody would manifest it differently. And some people really are really caring and nice and actual good parents, like, definitely. But I guess, yeah, one of the things that's interesting in the whole sort of drift of the world is that there's this kind of, I don't know, push in a very bad direction that people can, you know, sometimes really make a mess. And that's, yeah, sort of what are we handing over to our children? And we're handing over a bit of a mess. Why would we do that? And I guess some people are really trying to fix it and other people aren't.
Charlie, was that a hand?
It was a little hand up. I've got a sort of question.
Yeah.
I think because of the pandemic, I've had to let go a lot of my guidelines for being as green as possible.
Yeah.
So it would be 8 forms of public transport to get to see my dad, and I have an underlying condition. So I decided I bought a little hybrid car.
Yeah.
But I'm finding that I'm less anxious about climate change, but more angry generally with finding myself in a situation where I can't act out my life in a way that I feel is wholesome for the planet.
Yes.
And I'm hoping that I'll be able to balance that up.
Yeah.
As we hopefully move out of this current difficult phase.
Yeah.
But my question to you is, have you found that your clients have a lot of residual anger now at the lack of ability to be able to move forward because we're in quite a constrained lockdown way of living now? I just wondered if people wanted to tease that out a bit.
Yeah, totally. That's such a brilliant question. That's exactly what I have seen. And yeah, people, clients and friends and all sorts of people who are really involved with, you know, climate activism and have bought cars exactly during the pandemic because they were so freaked out about and didn't want to kind of contaminate other people by moving in public spaces. And yeah, always held planets of ways of being that went out the window. And I know things like what I ate during lockdown was completely different because of availability and all that kind of thing. So yeah, I think everyone that I know experienced something like that and is now feeling completely weird. But I suppose, yeah, it does go back to that question of what's the sort of, I don't know, the good life or the perfect life, or how to, I don't know, do things right or whatever, and that it's just not possible to have a blueprint for what's good and stick to it. And that's really disappointing.
Yeah. And I felt that because of the pandemic, the progress that I'd made, I feel not anxious, but I feel very sad that I've had to somehow lose that progress and that commitment, because I can only really manage to chug through the complex layers that we're dealing with now by bringing my frame of vision slightly smaller and less, therefore, on looking after our beautiful planet. And I find that very sad. It makes me very sad, and it also makes me angry. So it's like my anxiety has changed into a different kind of beast.
Yeah, definitely. And I wonder if that process is what goes on sort of with all of us all the time. And the thing of whether it turns inward or whether it turns outward. And you could say, well, when it turns outward, usually that's kind of a good thing, that if people are less kind of depressed and, you know, on their own and more getting out there and demonstrating, that the anger actually can be quite productive. But yeah, it sort of depends on what you do with it, how much you suffer it. And
yeah. It's complex at the moment. I mean, it was complex before, but now it's very layered for all of us.
Yeah, exactly. And I know that applications for therapy are actually more now than they were at the beginning of lockdown. That's, you know, some people found their anxiety went away at the beginning of lockdown because there were loads of things they didn't have to do and didn't have to put up with. But it seems that in the last couple of weeks, it's really gone up again. And Yeah.
Tricky times.
It is.
Just
I have to say, Charlie,
the love is what I say.
Very right.
Be good to yourself, be good to others.
but thank you, Charlie. And I agree. I think my plastic usage has sort of gone through the roof compared to where it was. I think really well on reducing all my plastics, and then obviously lockdown here, and it's like had to happen. Question for me: is there a generational thing? Oh, sorry, Gio. There's a comment there. Is that a question? Thank you both for a great discussion. I usually avoid talking about the climate or the economy at all out of fear of rejection or misunderstanding of my feelings. What tips would you have in managing oneself in conversation with others when your own anxiety can be so oppressing? Thank you, Joe. That's quite a question.
That seemed really good. Can I hear the first bit of it again? Because it was
you can see it in the chat actually if you want.
Brilliant.
So Joe usually avoids talking about the climate or the economy out of fear of rejection or misunderstanding of her views and her feelings.
Yeah.
What tips would you have in managing your conversation with others, essentially? Thank you, Joe.
Yeah.
That's a great question.
It's brilliant. Yeah, exactly. It's so hard. I mean, find the right people to talk to as well. Because I think, I imagine with the problem, if that's what you're worried about, then you're going to find, I would hope, a lot of other people who are very worried about it. And once you've got a collective of other people who are worried about that stuff, then you can, not be alone and maybe start to act together. But also, not feeling kind of uncool about it, or not feeling like you're just a downer, because that's the sort of, I don't know, the worst characterization of people who are worried about the climate is these sort of misery guts who'll ruin any party, who'll hate the food, who'll just be down on jollity of. It just that's terrible. And you can take the world seriously and take problems seriously at the same time as have a capacity for joy. And I don't know, one of the things, I don't know if it's really soppy to say it, but I do think that there's something sort of intrinsically exciting about life, and that one of the reasons that life exists is from whatever, first interaction of microorganisms brought life about. Sort of, why did it want to sustain itself? There was something intrinsically exciting about life, and why do any creatures do so much to keep living, and why do humans try so hard? And I think it's because there's something kind of brilliant and painful and difficult and complex and whatever about being, but for some reason people and creatures and plants seem to like it, seem to go after it or whatever. So I think it's not a downer to care about this stuff. It's exciting to care about it, and if you want to talk about the economy or the climate, then I don't know, people can love you for it.
Charlie says, pick your friends well.
Yes, exactly.
But I think a friends is a really good point. Thank you, Joe, for bringing that up, actually, because it is, I've got a group of friends that I've had since school, and, I will, I'll go out with them. I tried not to talk about it, but after a few pints, when we're out, maybe it will come out. And I sometimes do get up on my high horse a little bit. But I think one of the things that I've tried to do is, I'm a sustainability consultant. I work a lot in the industry, in the market, and looking at solutions. And I actually get really excited about the future possibilities. Yeah. Yes, we're in a tough time, but there are two ways out of it. There's the kind of dystopian view, and then there's the utopia. And actually, there's a greener society is a more connected society. It's a less capitalistic society. It's more people looking out for each other, like we're seeing in the mutual aid groups and that kind of stuff. And it's more community based. So there's a lot of value for it, apart from all the technologies. I think the technology stuff is fascinating as well.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask a question about age. Is there different? Actually, I'm going to stop that because Josh has put a comment in. Yes, I feel like making protests sound fun or at least communal. Invite people to something that's exciting that sometimes works. Yes, thank you, Josh. I think we had a quote in Extinction Rebellion at one point saying, "Do you want to do something that's sociable, fun, and gets you outside? Come along to Extinction Rebellion."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
and also creative.
Yeah,
I mean, the climate crisis will be solved with creativity, and it doesn't have to be doom and gloom.
Not
it's exciting.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing I find interesting. I joined Extinction Rebellion, so I used to be a protester with Climate Camp. I don't know if you guys remember that. Kind of 10 years ago, 2009 sort of time. And, that had a very good, the very interesting, communal ethos around it. And there were there was a different group in each city, and you'd have meetings in each cities, and the whole group would move around the country. So you'd go and stay in a squat in Leeds or something for a weekend and have a big old meeting, which was very communal and very interesting. And then a year ago, I started seeing Extinction Rebellion, and I was doing a volunteering for Action for Happiness. I don't know if you know that charity, but it's a charity all about helping people be happy and identifying all happiness psychology and all that. And I did a course, and actually the course was, do what you like and help try and make society better. So that's what made me go interested. I did a course in happiness, and that got me going and getting involved in Extinction Rebellion, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, and that's been one of the sort of, core principles, hasn't it, of XR, that it has to be fun, that you have to make protest fun, otherwise it's not going to go well for you.
Charlie and Josh, everyone's agreeing with us on that point.
But it's not fun, obviously, yeah.
I was going to ask about a generational thing. Do you see differences in people who come in terms of the older generation, kind of the baby boomers, versus, like you say, the people in their 20s and 30s? Because I think baby boomers, they've had it wonderfully, and they've had it really tough as well. They've had a lifestyle that, they've been told they can have everything, and they have had everything, and they didn't realize that a lot of their activities were ruining the planet. And certainly in the industry that I worked in the energy industry, it's quite tough, because you've got a lot of people who've been, in their 50s and 60s, they've been doing energy for years, oil and gas, and for most of their careers, they were providing electricity, energy to people. They were helping people, society develop. And all of a sudden, over the last 20 years, it's like, actually, what you're doing is destroying the planet. And it's quite a hard thing to swallow, especially now when their kids are starting to come in and saying, "What are you doing, Daddy?" In the oil company sort of thing. So, just interesting if there's much of a difference between the two sort of generations, as it were.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yes, but as ever, lots of different cases of people doing really different things. And I know because of having a teenage daughter, the word boomer gets thrown around in my house such a lot, mostly at me. But the thing, I suppose, of the sort of division, like the boomer people being really prepared to get out there and being really, really fearless, maybe because of this sort of realization that a lot of the stuff that they've been doing had been very destructive to the planet. And it was like, oh my God, my grandchildren, I've got to act now, and I'll get arrested, and I don't care, and whatever it takes. And that was really brilliant. But I think it must have been very upsetting for the people who are really invested in that narrative to have it slightly thrown back in their faces that they're just a privileged bunch of bastards, and now look at what they're doing. Which I do understand. I totally get it, why people would be pissed off about that. But at the same time, it's like, oh God, poor things. But what can you say?
It is a very challenging one. Any more questions, anyone in the chat? Do feel free to shout out. Okay, I think we're starting to lose people. It's getting to that time. Boomer, you're barely Gen, apparently, from Josh. Oh, sorry, Boomer, you're barely Generation X.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, fantastic. So I think we're at the hour actually. So unless anyone has, oh no, sorry, Peter's got. Was that a hand up there, Peter? You're going to need to unmute yourself if you are.
To speak with people in denial. Quite often, I think you mentioned those levels of protection are quite important because they can't cope. I mean, I'm thinking that might be the situation with Trump or our Prime Minister.
Yeah.
Is there a way of addressing it gently?
Yeah, there's stuff. I did try and put stuff about that in the book, because there are all these, studies around moral reframing and how to present things to people, present your argument in a certain way that resonates with the other person. So it's to sort of understand what that person's objectives are and then present your argument in a way that resonates with their objectives. And in a way, it's quite tricky and creepy. But in another way, I don't know, if people are passionately conservative, then presumably they want a planet to live on. And so in the end, some of the people who are looking quite slack now might suddenly think, oh my goodness, I have to act. So I guess don't presume because somebody's a bit sluggish and in denial that they're unaddressable or that they're sort of, beyond somehow, because those people might be the exact people you suddenly wake up to it, because exactly they don't want to lose things.
I think that's a really good point, actually. And in a way, you kind of need those people to make those changes, like ex-smokers who are completely evangelical about smoking. And we've seen that recently. I don't know if people have seen the news recently, but BP, one of the, let's be honest, one of the worst, climate criminals of our society. They, and again, I think a generational thing. They were all guns blazing. They were putting out a report saying they're going to continue to release, continue to expand and drill for more oil and increase. And then they had a CEO change, and the new CEOs come in and go, "I've read the writing on the wall. Actually, COVID has really pushed the industry into serious problems. And they've come out for the first big oil company ever that's gone out and said, we are going to reduce our actual output by 40% by 2030. And that's not nearly enough, but it's the first time any oil company's changed that. And if you get those kind of that have been in denial for so long, actually they become evangelical. And that's frankly, those are the kind of institutions we need to change.
Totally.
We need to keep engaging with the denialists.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, exactly. It's what you see in therapy, actually. When someone has a phobia, very often when they get over the phobia, it becomes a fetish. So someone who's afraid of buttons gets better, and then they need buttons around to get excited. So yeah, it's the same.
Unless anyone has got any other final points. So do you guys, have you got any more final points, Anouchka, Conor, before we wrap up? Sort of
Thank you so much.
Heading off.
Thank you.
Wonderful. So the book's available. We can buy it at all good bookstores now. Or is it coming out soon?
September the 9th. Yeah.
September the 9th. So there we go. Fantastic. I was waiting for that. What I'll do is I'll follow up. So everyone, I'll follow up. We've been recording this session, so I'll follow up everyone who's on the session, and we can provide some links and everything. But Anouchka, Conor, thank you very much for that. That was absolutely fascinating and such an important topic. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining. We will send this out to everyone so you can sort of pass it on in terms of video, but we're doing these regularly. We're doing this once a month. We are talking to a couple of other authors. One gentleman, I can't remember his name, but he's written a book called How Bad Are Bananas, which is the carbon footprint of everything. And I've also managed to rope in October a technologist who's going to come and talk to us about the future of transport and the future of food, which is very interesting. So that'll be October. Anouchka, thank you very, very much. It's been an absolute pleasure. Guys, that's been really, really interesting. And thank you, everyone. Have a lovely night. I will wrap it up there.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care all.
Thank you.
Cool. Anouchka, Conor, I'll drop you both an email tomorrow. Have a lovely evening. Take care, everyone. Well done. Bye-bye.